No Rules, Netflix and the Culture of Reinvention, by Reed Hastings and Erin Meyer. Introduction. Imagine it's the year 2000. You're stepping into a massive, gleaming office tower in Dallas, Texas. You're nervous. Your heart is pounding. You and your business partner run a tiny, 2-year-old startup that lets people order DVDs through the mail. You have just 100 employees, you're losing millions of dollars, and you're about to pitch a sale to the undisputed king of home entertainment, Blockbuster. A giant worth $6 billion, with nearly 9,000 stores around the world. As you step into the meeting room, you whisper to your partner, "Blockbuster is 1,000 times our size." The CEO, a confident man in an expensive suit, listens politely to your idea. You propose that Blockbuster buys your little company, Netflix, for $50 million. You'll run their online business for them. You'll be their path to the future. And then, he says no. Flatly. As you leave, you can almost hear the laughter of 60,000 Blockbuster employees echoing in your mind. Why would a powerhouse like that ever need a tiny, struggling company like yours? They had the brand, the money, the customers. They held all the cards. Fast forward 10 years. Blockbuster has declared bankruptcy. Another 10 years after that, Netflix is not just a streaming service with over 167 million subscribers in 190 countries, it's a full-fledged entertainment studio, winning Oscars and working with the world's greatest storytellers. So, what happened? How did David not only beat Goliath, but become the new giant of the land? That is the question at the heart of the book we're going to explore today. No Rules, Netflix and the Culture of Reinvention. Written by Netflix co-founder and CEO Reed Hastings, along with INSEAD professor Erin Meyer, this isn't just a business book. It's the blueprint for a radical, and sometimes controversial, way of thinking about work, talent, and freedom. For years, people have talked about the legendary Netflix Culture Deck, a 127-slide presentation that Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook once called the most important document ever to come out of Silicon Valley. It was famous for its brutal honesty. It said things like, adequate performance gets a generous severance package. It talked about a keeper test, where managers are told to ask themselves, if someone on my team was leaving for another company, would I fight to keep them? If the answer is no, you should let them go now. To many, this sounded like a recipe for a culture of fear. A brutal, unforgiving workplace that would crush creativity. And yet, the results speak for themselves. Netflix didn't just survive one industry shift, it has successfully reinvented itself 4 times in just 15 years. From DVDs to streaming, from licensing content to producing its own, from a US-only service to a global entertainment powerhouse. Most companies fail at just one of those turns. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the Netflix operating system. We're going to uncover the 3 core principles that allowed them to build this culture of freedom and responsibility. By the end of our time together, you won't just understand how Netflix works, you'll have a completely new framework for thinking about what it means to build a truly great team, whether that team is a global company, a small club, or even just the way you approach your own life and work. This is the story of how a company that broke all the rules ended up rewriting the rulebook for everyone else. Book summary. The story of the Netflix culture doesn't begin with a grand plan. It begins with a crisis. In the spring of 2001, the first internet bubble burst. Startups were vanishing overnight, venture capital dried up, and Netflix, which was far from profitable, was in serious trouble. Reed Hastings and his leadership team had to make a painful decision. They had to lay off 1/3 of their workforce, 40 of their 120 employees. Now, there were no obviously bad performers. So they divided the staff into 2 groups, the 80 absolute top performers they would keep, and 40 good, but less amazing, employees they would have to let go. It was agonizing. These weren't just colleagues, they were friends. The day of the layoffs was just as awful as you can imagine. Tears, slammed doors, frustration. Reed braced himself for the backlash from the remaining employees. He expected anger, resentment, and a collapse in morale. But something strange happened. After a few weeks, the atmosphere in the office didn't just stabilize, it improved dramatically. The place was suddenly buzzing with passion, energy, and ideas. And here's the crazy part: with 30% fewer employees, they were getting more work done. The remaining 80 people were working longer hours, but they were happier than ever. It felt, as one of them described it, like being in love with your work. This was Reed's road to Damascus moment. It was the turning point that changed his entire understanding of what makes a great workplace. He realized that a great workplace isn't about fancy perks, a beautiful gym, or free sushi for lunch. A great workplace is about one thing, and one thing only: stunning colleagues. This became the first and most important building block of the entire Netflix culture. Reed called it talent density. Think about it like this. If you have a team of 5 incredible performers and 2 who are just adequate, the merely adequate ones don't just do their own average work. They bring down the performance of the entire team. They sap the manager's energy, lower the quality of discussions, and force the top performers to work around them. Eventually, the stars get frustrated and leave, because talented people want to be surrounded by other talented people. Performance, both good and bad, is contagious. The 2001 layoffs, painful as they were, had accidentally created a work environment with an incredibly high concentration of talent. And in that environment, everyone was learning more, accomplishing more, and felt more motivated. They were pushing each other to be better. From that day forward, Reed made a commitment. The number one goal at Netflix would be to maintain this incredible talent density. They would hire only the very best, and they would have the courage to let go of anyone who wasn't a star performer, even if they were a good person and worked hard. This is where the metaphor of a company as a family breaks down. In a family, you stick together no matter what. You support your slightly lazy cousin unconditionally. But Netflix decided they weren't a family. They were a professional sports team. On a pro sports team, the goal is to win the championship. Players have deep relationships and support each other, but everyone knows the coach's job is to make sure the best player is in every single position. You don't keep someone on the team just because they try hard. You keep them because they are the best person for the job. Effort isn't enough. Performance is what matters. This mindset, we are a team, not a family, became a core part of the Netflix ethos. Now, building a team of stunning colleagues is a fantastic goal. But it brings up a second, very difficult question. How do you get a group of brilliant, highly talented people to work together effectively, to challenge each other, and to grow, without letting egos and politics get in the way? Reed found the answer in a very personal place: his own marriage. Early in his career, both at his first company and at home, Reed was conflict avoidant. He didn't like upsetting people, so he'd work around problems instead of addressing them directly. His marriage was struggling. He and his wife were growing distant, and he didn't know how to fix it. So, they started going to a marriage counselor. That counselor got them to do something radical: talk openly and honestly about their feelings and resentments. For Reed, it was a revelation. He realized he'd been saying one thing, family is the most important thing to me, while his actions were saying something else entirely. This transparent feedback, as painful as it was, saved their marriage. He decided to bring this same commitment to honesty back to the office. He began encouraging everyone at Netflix to say exactly what they really thought, but with one crucial rule: it had to be with positive intent. The goal wasn't to attack or to hurt someone, it was to get feedback out onto the table where it could be dealt with openly. This became the second pillar of the Netflix culture: increase candor. They coined a simple but powerful expression: only say about someone what you will say to their face. If someone came to Reed to complain about a colleague, he would ask, "What did that person say when you spoke to them about this directly?" This is incredibly hard to do. We are all conditioned to be polite, to avoid confrontation, to whisper behind people's backs. But at Netflix, failing to speak up when you have feedback that could be helpful is seen as being disloyal to the company. You have a chance to help the business and your colleague improve, and you are choosing not to. To make this work, they developed a simple framework for giving feedback, which they call the 4 A's. First, when giving feedback. 1. Aim to assist. Your feedback must be given with positive intent. You're not trying to get frustration off your chest, you're genuinely trying to help the other person or the company succeed. 2. Actionable. Your feedback has to be specific about what the person can do differently. Your presentation was confusing as bad feedback. If you started with your main point at the beginning, your presentation would be more powerful as good, actionable feedback. And when receiving feedback. 3. Appreciate. You have to fight the natural urge to get defensive. Your job is to listen with an open mind and show appreciation for the input, even if it stings. 4. Accept or discard. You are required to listen to all feedback, but you are not required to follow it. The decision to act on the feedback is entirely up to you, the recipient. Once you have these 2 pillars in place, a high talent density and a culture of radical candor, something amazing becomes possible. You can start removing controls. This is the no rules part of no rules rules. At his first company, Pure Software, Reed Hastings made a classic mistake. As the company grew, a few employees did stupid things. One salesperson stayed at a 5-star hotel that cost $700 a night. Frustrated, Reed created a travel policy with strict spending limits. Another time, an employee's dog chewed a hole in the conference room rug. So, Reed created a no dogs at work policy. Each time a mistake happened, a new process was put in place to prevent it from happening again. The company became more efficient, but it also became less creative. The Mavericks left, and the people who were good at coloring within the lines stayed. When the market shifted, the company was unable to adapt, and Reed ended up selling it. He vowed not to make the same mistake at Netflix. He realized that most rules and processes in large companies aren't there for the top performers. They're there to manage the few employees who show sloppy or irresponsible behavior. But what if you don't have those people? What if your entire company is made up of stunning colleagues you trust completely? If you have high talent density, you don't need the rules. The denser the talent, the more freedom you can offer. So, Netflix began a radical experiment. They started ripping pages out of the employee handbook. The first to go was the vacation policy. In 2003, an employee pointed out something odd. "We don't track the hours people work per day or week," he said. "We work some weekends, we respond to emails at night. Why are we tracking vacation days per year?" It was a brilliant question. So Netflix got rid of its vacation policy entirely. There was no more allotment of days. No tracking. No approvals. The new policy was simply, take vacation. You decide when you need a break, whether it's for a day, a week, or a month. Now, Reed had 2 nightmares about this. In the first, he'd run into the office during a busy period to find it completely empty, because everyone was on vacation. In the second, he'd find the office full of exhausted, burnt-out zombies who hadn't taken a vacation in years because they were afraid to. To make it work, they learned two things were critical. First, leaders must model taking big vacations. If the boss only takes 2 weeks off, everyone else will feel pressured to do the same, no matter what the policy says. Reed himself now takes about 6 weeks of vacation a year and talks about it openly, signaling to everyone that it's not just allowed, it's encouraged. Second, managers have to lead with context, not control. Instead of having a rule, you have a conversation. An accounting manager, for example, would set the context for her team that taking vacation in early January, the crunch time for closing the books, is not in the company's best interest. You trust people to do the right thing, but you give them the context to understand what the right thing is. The next policy to go was for travel and expenses. Instead of a thick handbook detailing what you could and couldn't spend, Netflix replaced it with a simple, 5-word guideline: act in Netflix's best interest. That's it. No approval process. No spending limits. If you're flying overnight from Los Angeles to New York for a big presentation the next morning, it's probably in Netflix's best interest for you to fly business class so you arrive rested. If you're taking a short flight from LA to Mexico City with the whole team, it probably isn't. This doesn't mean it's a free-for-all. There are checks on the back end. Managers can review their team's expenses, and the finance department audits a percentage of all expenses annually. And the rule is clear: if you abuse the freedom, you're fired. Not with a warning, but immediately and loudly, so everyone understands the consequences of irresponsibility. What's fascinating is that this freedom often leads to people being more frugal. With a strict policy, some people will spend right up to the limit because the rules allow it. Without a rule, they feel a greater sense of personal responsibility and often spend less. This idea, that freedom fosters responsibility, is the core engine of the entire culture. But if you want this to work, you have to be willing to pay for it. And that leads to another radical idea at Netflix: how they handle compensation. To maintain their high talent density, Netflix decided they had to pay more than anyone else. They operate on what engineers call the rockstar principle. A study in 1968 found that the best software programmers weren't just 2 or 3 times better than their average counterparts, they were up to 25 times faster at debugging and 10 times faster at execution. One truly great engineer is worth more than a dozen average ones. Reed Hastings believes this applies to almost any creative role, not just programming. The best marketing expert can come up with a campaign that attracts millions more customers. The best content executive has an instinct for a hit show that is thousands of times more valuable than someone who doesn't. So, Netflix decided that for all creative roles, they would pay top of personal market. Instead of hiring 10 average people, they would hire one rock star and pay them more than any other company would be willing to. This also meant getting rid of performance bonuses. Most companies offer a salary plus a bonus tied to achieving certain goals. But Netflix realized that in a fast-changing industry, a goal set in January might be irrelevant by June. Tying people to outdated goals stifles flexibility. Furthermore, research shows that for creative work, contingent pay, like a bonus, can actually decrease performance. It narrows your focus and pulls you out of the open, creative headspace where great ideas live. So, Netflix just puts all that money into salary. They offer a higher base salary than competitors who rely on bonuses, which makes them incredibly attractive to top talent. But how do you know what top of market is for each employee, year after year? This is where it gets really unconventional. Netflix encourages its employees to take calls from recruiters at other companies. They even encourage them to go on interviews. The rule is, do it openly, and share what you learn. It's your responsibility to know what you're worth, and it's the company's responsibility to pay you that, or more, to keep you. This turns the secretive, adversarial dance of salary negotiation into an open and honest conversation. It ensures that Netflix is always paying to keep its best people, proactively. It's far more expensive to lose a star employee and recruit a replacement than it is to pay them a little more in the first place. So now we have a company full of highly paid, stunningly talented people, who give each other constant, candid feedback, and who are free from the constraints of most corporate rules. This brings us to the final, and most powerful, piece of the puzzle. With all these other elements in place, you can eliminate the biggest control of all: decision-making approvals. At most companies, the boss's job is to approve or block the decisions of their employees. The bigger the decision, the higher up the pyramid it has to go for approval. This model is safe, but it's also incredibly slow and kills innovation. Netflix works on a completely different principle, summed up in another one of their mantras: don't seek to please your boss. Seek to do what is best for the company. This means that any employee, at any level, can make big decisions, even multi-million-dollar decisions, without getting approval from their manager. The person who makes the decision is called the informed captain. Their job isn't to get consensus or approval. Their job is to gather input, listen to all perspectives, and then make the call. They own the decision, and they own the outcome. To make this work, they use a process called the innovation cycle. It has 4 steps. First, you farm for dissent or socialize your idea. You actively seek out disagreement. You don't just look for people who will pat you on the back, you find the smartest people who will challenge your idea and poke holes in it. You create a shared document and invite dozens of colleagues to leave comments and debate. This isn't about getting permission, it's about stress testing your thinking. Second, for a really big idea, you test it out. A great example is when Netflix was considering offering downloads for offline viewing. Both Reed Hastings and the chief product officer were publicly against it. They believed streaming would become so ubiquitous that downloading would be irrelevant. But a junior researcher on the team had doubts. So he ran tests in Germany and India and found that in markets with less reliable internet, a huge percentage of users relied on downloading. The data was so compelling that it completely changed the minds of top leadership, and Netflix now offers downloads worldwide. The researcher was empowered to test an idea that the CEO himself had dismissed. Third, as the informed captain, you make your bet. You've gathered the input, you've seen the data, now it's your call. And to reinforce this ownership, at Netflix, the informed captain is the one who signs the contract, even if it's a $100 million deal. It's a powerful symbol that the responsibility rests with you, not with some vice president 3 levels up. Finally, if your bet succeeds, you celebrate. But if it fails, you sunshine it. This is critical. You don't hide your failures. You talk about them openly, publicly, and frequently. You write a memo explaining what went wrong and, most importantly, what you learned from it. This does 2 things. It allows the entire organization to learn from your mistake, and it signals to everyone else that it is safe to take big risks. If people are punished for failed bets, they will stop taking them, and innovation will die. This whole system, talent density, candor, and freedom, creates a virtuous cycle. A culture of freedom and responsibility attracts more top talent, which allows you to grant even more freedom, which leads to faster speed and more innovation. The final test for this radical culture came when Netflix expanded globally into 130 countries in a single day. Would this very American, very direct culture work in places like Japan, Brazil, or the Netherlands? They quickly learned that while the desire for freedom is universal, the expression of things like candor is not. In Japan, where harmony is prized, giving direct, critical feedback to your boss is almost unthinkable. In the Netherlands, feedback is so direct that their American colleagues can sometimes find it harsh. Netflix learned they couldn't just export their culture wholesale. They had to adapt. This became the fifth A of their feedback model. In less direct cultures like Japan, they learned to rely more on formal, structured feedback moments, like their live 360-degree feedback dinners, because spontaneous, informal feedback was less likely to happen. In more direct cultures, they coached their American employees to understand that blunt feedback wasn't an attack, it was just feedback. The lesson was to talk about the cultural differences. To be curious, to be humble, and to learn before you teach. At its core, the Netflix culture is a choice between two different ways of managing people. You can operate like a symphony orchestra, where every musician has a precise score and follows the conductor perfectly. It's about minimizing variation and executing with flawless precision. This is the world of rules and process. Or, you can operate like a jazz band. The musicians know the song's overall structure, but they have the freedom to improvise, to riff off one another, to create something new and beautiful in the moment. This is the world of freedom and responsibility. For companies where the biggest risk is making a mistake, like in an emergency room or an airplane factory, the symphony orchestra is the right model. But for creative companies, where the biggest risk is failing to innovate and becoming irrelevant, you need to build a jazz band. You need to create the conditions for improvisation and trust your stunningly talented musicians to make beautiful music together. Commentary. So, what can we take away from this incredible story? When you peel back all the layers of the Netflix culture, you're left with a profound and somewhat challenging idea about trust. Most organizations are built on a foundation of control because, deep down, they don't fully trust their employees. They trust them enough to do a job, but not enough to take a vacation without tracking it, or to spend company money without approval, or to make a big decision without a sign-off. What Reed Hastings did was flip that assumption on its head. He decided to build a company that was founded on the opposite principle, that if you hire truly exceptional people, the most rational and effective thing you can do is trust them completely. This isn't about blind faith, it's a system. You build the conditions for trust, high talent density and extreme candor, and then you get out of the way. The phrase that sticks with me the most is lead with context, not control. It's such a simple idea, but it's incredibly difficult to practice. As a leader, it's so much easier to just say yes or no, to give an order, to create a rule. It gives you the illusion of being in charge. Leading with context requires more work up front. It requires you to be so aligned and so clear in your own thinking that you can articulate the why behind every goal so powerfully that your team can then figure out the how on their own. It means your job isn't to be the chess master moving all the pieces, it's to be the gardener who creates the perfect soil, so amazing things can grow. For any of us listening, whether you're leading a company or just your own life, there are a few simple but powerful actions we can take from this book right now. First, take a hard look at the teams you're a part of. Ask yourself, are we operating like a family, where we protect everyone regardless of performance? Or are we operating like a professional sports team, where we are committed to having the best person in every position? That simple shift in metaphor can change everything about the standards you set for yourself and others. Second, practice the 4 A's of feedback in a low-stakes situation this week. Find a moment to give someone a piece of actionable feedback with a genuine intent to help them. And just as importantly, find someone you trust and ask them the keeper test prompt. If I were thinking of leaving, how hard would you fight to keep me? The answer might be scary, but it will also be the most valuable piece of information you get all year. And finally, the next time someone on your team makes a mistake, try this. Instead of reacting with frustration or blame, ask yourself the question Reed Hastings forces himself to ask: what context did I fail to set? That single question shifts the focus from blaming people to improving the system. It's the ultimate act of leadership, and it's at the very heart of what it means to build a culture of freedom and responsibility. That was a summary of No Rules by Reed Hastings and Erin Meyer. We've covered the core pillars of their philosophy today, but honestly, a summary is just a map of the territory. The real adventure begins when you explore the landscape for yourself. This book is filled with dozens of stories, examples, and moments of reflection that we just couldn't fit into our time together. If any of the ideas we've discussed, about talent, freedom, or radical honesty, have sparked something in you, I'd truly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning a new management theory. It's about fundamentally challenging your own assumptions about trust and control, and what it truly takes to build something great. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It lets us know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another one of the transformative books from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.